Joining us is John Terzaken. He joins us. He's with the partner with the Allen and Overy law firm. John specializes in global cases of antitrust, criminal investigations, and litigation. Let's start there. These are pretty tough cases, aren't they? Because there's really no advantage if you're inside this cartel and you're fixing prices. You don't want to go to the government or anything like that. How do they pierce the veil?
Well, if you look specifically at the LCD case, and this is true of a lot of cartels now, each of the countries around the world that prosecutes this kind of conduct has a leniency program that provides incredible incentives to these companies to come in and self-report this conduct. LCD is one of those cases, among others, where you had folks who came in who wanted to self-report this conduct in order to essentially immunize themselves from potential penalties. And so once you have that, that arises the investigation.
And so then, take us a little bit further. Then what happens? Do you try and get a microphone or a camera in for these meetings? I mean, that's what happens in a lot of these cases, isn't it?
Depends on the regime. Certainly in the United States, we have a number of covert tools that are at our disposal, and the U.S. Department of Justice utilizes a lot of those to investigate those cases.
Then we have, we're seeing this global marketplace. The United States is taking action, Europeans, China. You would think that the penalties are pretty stiff, but I guess the advantages of price fixing outweigh that in some respects for these people. They must look at the margins and say, hey, there's an advantage to doing this.
Well, if you look at the harm that's caused by some of this conduct, it's quite extreme. In the cases where you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars where consumers are overpriced in markets, frankly, where the bottom's falling out of the cost of the particular product. So yes, the upside is potentially huge. I think what you're seeing, though, including the development here in China, is that more and more countries around the world are starting to crack down on this conduct. And the question's now becoming is whether the benefits are actually worth it.
And let me ask you about consumers. Do they have long memories when it comes to this sort of thing, or is this just something that's a blip on the radar? I mean, do they look at that as, the potential harm long term?
You would expect that consumers would know. As in many industries, though, most corporations who go through these kinds of actions, who ultimately make good with the authorities, make good with consumers, you hope have turned the page. And so you hope for most of these big companies, when they go back out to the market, they're going to do so in a fair and competitive manner. And so hopefully consumers won't have that concern. And antitrust is not about shutting down competition, it's about promoting it.
And how many of these kinds of cases do we see? I mean, these are the big ones that really get the publicity, but is this going on out there quite a bit?
There's no shortage of cases in the pipeline. I could tell you for the antitrust division, it's true around the world, that time and again, every year you see a significant cartel that breaks out on an international scale.
And you would think that in terms of policing this sort of thing, there probably are not that many people on top of this sort of thing that would give the people the idea that maybe we can get away with it?
Well, that's changing. You have 125 countries around the world now that have antitrust enforcement tools. I would say of those 125, you've probably got 20 to 30 of them that are aggressively pursuing this kind of conduct. This latest development shows that China is going to be one of them.
China's a little later to the game than the Europeans or the U.S. Any reason for that?
I think, their cartel laws have been developing over time. They just in 2008 passed their new anti-monopoly law that's given the authorities much more room, essentially, to go after this kind of conduct. And just over the course of the last year, you've seen a significant number of investigations, particularly on the domestic market. This case being really of significance because it's the first time they've really forayed out into the international market.
Are the penalties tough enough, in your estimation?
Certainly in the U.S. and elsewhere, they are increasingly tough on companies. I mean, in LCD alone, the U.S. government charged and ultimately penalized 8 corporations for a total of $1.3 billion. That's a pretty stiff penalty to pay.
All right. Well, John, thanks so much for coming in and talking
Thanks
to us,
for
breaking it all down for us. We certainly appreciate it.